So guys, in this video we are going to look at CSS and going ahead revision tour of it. So first thing first, we have something called as DHTML. You have a dynamic HTML, right? So dynamic HTML includes HTML, JavaScript, DOM and CSS. So majorly if you think about it in a way, right? HTML provides a structure, right? And then CSS provide beauty to it. It's like a beauty parlor for HTML, and JavaScript provides a brain. So imagine it in human body, right? We have skeleton, so HTML is skeleton. Then CSS is the outer beauty, outer layering on it, like going ahead making it beautiful. CSS does that job, and then JavaScript is the brain, right? So DOM is not entirely right now in the course, but it is actually defining the skeletal structure of HTML in some way, right? So going ahead, next up we have static versus dynamic websites, right? Pretty easy topic. The way I remember this is, you know, looking at these two pictures I have put in. So if you take a look at this, this is YouTube, right? Very familiar, right? So if you go ahead and click on reload, you will see some other recommendation going ahead. Might be some of them are repeated, but you'll generally see different suggestions. So that is actually a dynamic, you know dynamic page or dynamic website, right? Then there is something called as static. So static is something like Wikipedia. It would remain same for the eternity, right? Every time you are searching for Albert Einstein, everything would remain same, right? But dynamic websites, when you open them up, the content would keep on changing based on a you know some kind of data. For example, if you look at Amazon, right? Last time maybe I was looking at, say, laptops to buy into from Amazon, right? Next time when I go back to Amazon, what you are gonna see is, the Amazon is gonna show you all the laptop suggestions and everything. So that is what it would be, right? So we have majorly these two differences, right? Static content remains same, right? And dynamic content changes in accordance to the data, like the website is receiving, right? So examples: Amazon, YouTube, news websites again. So dynamic, if you think every day there would be new news, right? So it would keep on updating, so that is dynamic. So static, going ahead, documentation website, portfolio website. Portfolio is majorly something like your resume, or maybe you are going in and putting, my name is Shobham, I have done, say, BTech and all that, right? Something of those sort, right? So that is done. Next up, CSS benefits. So there are majorly 6 CSS benefits. One is speed, right? So majorly pages download faster, sometimes as much as by 50%, right? Due to CSS, right? If we have more than 2 to 3 pages, why? Because now what we are doing is, first when you studied HTML, therein you had something called as attributes, right? So for example, if you want to paint the page green, you would write some kind of attribute like bg color is equal to green in HTML. Now what we do is, we just write simple HTML. We don't write any attribute there. All the attribute are actually written in CSS, and because it is written in CSS, we won't call it attribute, we'll call it a property. There is a reason to that. Simple reason: when I say attribute, you will think of HTML. When I say property, you will think of CSS. That's all. So what we did, we just imagine someone making a painting, right? So someone would go ahead and make a sketch, right? A person A, who is responsible for structure, make a sketch. Person B is responsible for painting it, right? Painting inside those outlines of, say, some portrait or some picture, right? So HTML is just making those outlines of, say, some kind of picture, and CSS is adding in those colors. So we are doing it separately, right? So that is why the speed is faster, right? Because HTML loads up really faster without all the attributes. The size is reduced, and then you just load up one CSS for, say, 10 20 HTML files. Next up, developer friendly. So herein, as I said, developer have to write less code, less attributes in HTML. Almost none attributes would go in HTML. Then, because of it, it makes stuff easy, right? Then consistency, because one CSS file, one CSS style. For example, you want like you have 10 web pages, right? So all the web pages, what you want that everyone should have a blue color, right? So you just write one CSS file and link it up to all the 20 HTML. So I'll show you how linking is done, right? You externally link it. You just okay. So simply what you do, HTML towards the top of HTML, you write one line. You just tell it, okay, this is my CSS. Load all the load all the beauty and all the properties from the CSS. Right? That's it. So all the 20 pages will go to the CSS, load up everything. Right. So that way, what will happen? It would be very consistent, right? If humans were doing like working on say 20 pages, they might add their own flair to it, right? All the 20 pages might look a bit different, right? For example, there's certain shade of red that I might prefer, you might not, right? So that is how it works, right? So all 20 pages might have different shades of red. If I want red on all those 20 pages, but in CSS you define one red, and because that one CSS is applied to 20 pages, so it would be same. Next up, maintenance. Now maintenance is easy, right? Because for example, now if you need to change the structure, you will just open HTML file, change the structure. But if you need to change, going ahead, the way the page is looking, right? The properties for that page, majorly by property I mean like color, font, right? And then the placement of some kind of text, right? So that would be majorly done in CSS, right? So now you know which file to open, right? Next up is scalability, right? So if you think in terms of scalability, right? So because now just imagine you need to update 100 pages, and you want all these 100 HTML pages to have say again red color, right? So you just make one CSS file and then link it up. Otherwise what you have to do, you'll have to majorly go into all the 100 pages, right? One by one open all the 100 pages and add in say BG color attribute. Now just imagine you are done with this, you added red color. Now client comes in and says what we need is key, going ahead, also change the font for the Christmas to some festive font, then we'll change it back. So in the normal circumstances, not using CSS HTML, if you are using, right, so that are actually not normal for a company, but the perspective will take. So case one, not using CSS, only using HTML, what we are gonna do is that you know what they are gonna do is they are gonna open all the 100 pages, you know add in one line of font, right? Like font attribute, and then save it up, reload and test all the 100 pages, versus you just open one CSS file, just write down one line for that font, save it up and close it, and it reflects in all those 100 pages. So the CSS one is obviously easier, right? You'll actually understand all these points once you look at the examples, right? So next up, independence of work. So if the work is divided, right? uh, so the designer is working on how the page would look, right? And say the programmer is working on the HTML structure. So HTML for structure, CSS for design, that's all, right? So that is how these both can independently work apart, right? One can create a CSS file as he wants, the way he wants the HTML to look like, right? And the other programmer can work on HTML, right? Just the way he wants to. But then eventually, uh, you know the CSS file made by the designer could be integrated into HTML with just a simple one line, right? So the way I think about it is, right, I've added, how to think, you can read it through. So the way I think about these things is I draw out all these, benefits out of examples, right? I don't remember these benefits. What I remember is, how it's coded, right? So to code it up, the syntax is used write a selector, property and value, right? So I'll quickly show you the external one, right? And that way you are gonna understand it much better, right? So just imagine, say going ahead, okay, let's start with inline, right? So just imagine you have this HTML file right here. So what you want to do is you want to say add some kind of style that is color red. You want H3 to have a color that is red, right? So this is inline CSS, right? If you take a look, यहाँ style लिखा है. Whenever you see a style attribute, then it is nothing but a CSS, right? So now you'll ask ki, it looks like it is defeating the purpose of using CSS, because CSS, as I said, is another file altogether. So we just again write it like an attribute. So yes, that is true. So inline CSS is almost never used, apart from some cases, right? Some special cases, right? So you'll understand that later, right? Once you understand external and external and internal, then only you will be able to wrap your head around in inline CSS. Okay, so I have given the example here, but still, to understand it at depth, you'll need that, right? Then internal, right? Internal actually is again writing CSS in HTML. So but at the top, at the top what you add is a style tag. So previous one for inline was attribute, right? Because it was coming with the, if you take a look, you can see a contrasting difference. So taking a look here, right? So here it has, like, it says H3 style color red. The output is something like this for all of the code. So I am putting with H3, so style becomes an attribute because of that here. But here we are using it like independently, so that is actually a tag, style tag. Then style type, and if you see H1 is a selector. So what we are doing is, in CSS what we do is we link up different tags. So we write the tag h1. So what this means is ki, the CSS file which so we the HTML file to which we are linking our CSS, right? The HTML file, I'll repeat, to which we are linking the CSS, the h1 in that HTML file, right, that is using the CSS, so would have background color of pink. Simple as that, right? Then all the p tags, right, would have a color that is pink, right? So we we suggest a selector here. We write a selector, not suggest, write a selector. Then in it, we write the property and the value of it, right? So if you take a look at it carefully, the paragraph, right, paragraph hello, all this is a paragraph text, is actually in pink color of text, right? But the when I use background color property and write pink, so h1 has a background color of pink, right? Okay, so that is how it works, right? Going ahead, the this is not again very widely used, right? Because both these inline and external do not give all these benefits. No benefit, actually they don't give any benefit. Now you might ask, why do they exist? They exist for some special peculiar cases that we are gonna talk about later on, right? In the mixed wala, then you are gonna understand क्या अच्छा इसलिए होता है. So example makes it way clearer, right? So going ahead, if you again take a look how to write external CSS, same, right? Have like write a selector, then bracket, color and blue. But now what you do is you add one more file to it. So what I mean by that is, so if you take a closer look here, right, at this image, I'll just quickly try to open it up, right? So what I'll do is I'll just increase the size of it. So now you can see it says two files, css example1 html.html and color style.css. So this css file is different. This css is actually not contained in what, in html, right? So that means that is external. We created a new file and changed the extension to .css, right? It says the type as .css. So what we do is we just write all the CSS. We said h1, all the h1s would have color blue, font family would be Times New Roman, right? So going ahead, right, I have also documented all of what I am saying in some way. If you read it, you'll still understand from this notes. But going ahead, looking at it, this is the HTML. I'm using the same HTML almost in all the examples to make it easier, right, for you to wrap around your head. So this is one line which I added to the HTML, that is link relation, right, style sheet and hyperlink reference color style.css. So this is how I link actually. I just write one line and write the name of the CSS, right. So that is color style.css. If you take a look, the name is color style.css. If I someday change it to say say shubham style.css, yep, I'll have to just edit the name here, shubham style.css, and it will take up that CSS, but it should exist in the same folder, right. If you see, color style.css and css example1.html both exist in the same file. Because of that, I am able to add you know on this. So simply said, in the HTML in which you are using the CSS, the HTML file and the CSS file should exist in the same, right, in the same folder. And if it does not, so what you will have to do, you will have to add a path, whole of the path key. Okay, you will have to tell the address key HTML. This is the CSS file and this is where it stays, right. ये इसका address है. For example, here in C C users my PC name desktop and color style.css, right. So that is whole of its address or the path, right. You will have to suggest, but if it's in same folder, so by default it checks in the same folder, then you don't need to write whole path, right. So going ahead, I just I wrote a HTML, right, sorry, I wrote a CSS file here, right. H1 color blue font family Times New Roman, right. If you take a look at the syntax, H1 is the selector, then curly bracket, then writing a property value, then semicolon, to tell HTML ki, okay, a new property is starting after semicolon, this property is ended color. Now we write font family Times New Roman value, then we put a semicolon to tell, okay, new property is again starting. Now we come up to the most important thing, that is mixed CSS. So guys, looking at mixed CSS here, you know what you need to actually understand is, herein I have used all three CSS together, right. So HTML head, right, then again style, so this is internal, right, internal CSS. Then this one here is inline CSS. So just remember, right, at the top you'll again see link relation, this external CSS, right. So the way to so the question that would be asked is ki, what would be the output of it. So it is super simple, right. So first, see if you know paragraph tag, if you see here, has internal CSS which is with the property of color yellow. So if it has, sorry, not internal, inline. So if it has inline CSS like this, so paragraph would be yellow. If the property is in inline, it would be rendered that way. There is a reason to that, because first it would extend, it would say in some way, look at the priority. So just imagine P style color yellow is here, right. If I look at again P color Dodger blue, right. Now it conflicts, it doesn't know ki which color should I give, right. So which holds a priority. So inline holds a priority, then internal holds a priority, and then the last priority is given to the external one, right. So this paragraph would be color yellow, but the next paragraph, if you see, right, paragraph tag hello students, it does not have any inline, right, any inline CSS. So because it does not have any inline CSS, we'll look it up and we'll say, okay, it would have a Dodger blue, right, it would be in Dodger blue color, the text. But again, take a look at this. So it, yes, has inline CSS with it, that says P style color yellow, but it does not say anything about background color. So it will pick up color here from inline because that's the priority, but as there is no other property for background color, so it will pick up background color pink from the internal CSS, right? And then we are gonna look at the external CSS if there are any more properties, right? In terms of conflict of properties, right? What we are gonna do, we are just gonna simply, you know, write down the inline one, right? Inline, then internal, then external. So that is the priority we'll be giving, right? And it makes sense. Reason being, the way you can think is, first, for example, external says the color, say orange, right? So first orange would be painted, then the code would run, then it would see, okay, internal says Dodger blue, then on the orange it would paint Dodger blue, right? Removing orange, right? Then it would be Dodger blue. Then what it will see when the code is executing, it would see, okay, style color yellow, it says yellow, right, towards the end, then it would paint yellow, right? Removing the Dodger blue in some way. Okay, so that is the case with the priority, and that is how you are gonna look at things. So just imagine, if in external CSS there is more to it, right? If they say a font family, Jokerman in external one, then what would happen, right? The paragraph, both of these paragraph, because not in inline and not in internal, the property of this, font family is given, but font family, imagining it is given in external, it will pick it up from there, right? So that is how you're going to look at, right? So here the font family, like I have written the CSS code, external one this is, so is Times New Roman, so it will be picking Times New Roman, right? So I want you to try it out for the H1, right? So H1, if you see here, has just this one, right? So if you take a look here, font family Jokerman, right? H1, so font family, but H1 in the external one has color and font family, right? So font family collide, so we'll be choosing the internal, right? So Jokerman would be the font family, but because internal one does not have any property for color, the color would be blue, the color for H1, right? If you see the output here, right, these are the answers that I have written, right? So that you can also go in through and try it yourself and understand, okay, this would be the case and how it works, right? And one more thing, if you are done with it, you are really good to go for the exam. But now coming back to the question key, why sometimes, why is there inline and internal? Almost the same reason, right? For example, you have 1,000 pages, right? Say for Flipkart you have 1,000 pages, right? Worth of HTML, but what you need in just one page, right? You need the Flipkart logo or the text to be really big and shining, right, when you enter the home page. So CSS maintains consistency in all those 1,000 pages, but if you need that just one exception, so that is where you can write one line of inline CSS to go ahead and make that one on that one page, Flipkart a little bit bigger, for example. So that is something, that is some kind of use case you can have, right? When you need just one specific change in one page, not all the 1,000 pages, then you can take a look at this, right? So yep, so this is how it works, right? First priority inline, second internal, then third external, right? So I have also broken it down in steps. Identify if the line of code has inline CSS. If it has inline, this is that property is gonna be working. Then take a look at what other properties does the internal have rather than the inline ones, right? Then put it right, write it down, and then go to the external and just write it down. Now it's just playing with the CSS. The rest of it is going through looking at different these codes, right? For example, this is one of the code, right? So when I talk about the code, we are going to focus on hyper href, that is bgimage.css, and then looking at the body of things, because rest usually is the same. So right, I have again taken all the HTML same, for the sake that the understanding and the reading is much faster and better. So CSS test h1 fruits, then h1 h2 and paragraph p tag. So if we take a look here, right, it says CSS for a body, right? Body, it is saying add some kind of image, that is sky.png, and it is saying background repeat, do not repeat, right? So this is actually the output of the above one, right? So it is not repeating, right? If I say repeat, it would be repeating in all the directions, right? This is like one tile. If you look at your home, maybe if you have seen tiles, the way it works, you have one tile, then you put another same, then you put hundreds of them until the whole space is covered with it. So no repeat says do not repeat a tile, we just have one tile. Repeat says keep on repeating, right, both in x and y, right? And that way what it would do, it would cover all the position, right, all the space. So going ahead, guys, looking at the next one, right, h2. So if you take a look at h2 right here, so that says color orange, right? So h2, if you are gonna take a look at, right, so that is fruits orange, yup. And then we are gonna take a look at h1, right? So h1, it says color is red and background color is black. So there is a red color and the background color for h1 is black, right? So this is a background color. One thing if you may notice, right, because we write color blue in the body, it affects paragraph because we don't have anything specifically said for the paragraph, any CSS for the paragraph, so it would again turn blue because it is a part of the body. So that means if we won't specify anything for any other tag, if we added any other tag, it would always be looking at you know the CSS suggested by the body, right? It would take up the parent CSS, body is the parent, so herein we can say color blue would be applicable, and you can see it, right? And if you need these codes, right, it is best to go ahead, maybe click on this link, right, and download all the codes from the repository. I'll just quickly click it up, just click on code and download zip, and herein you'll get all the codes really well, set up really well, right? And you can go ahead and study like that. Okay, so just try to run it up, maybe make a little bit of changes. For example, try out, instead of no repeat, try out repeat, or repeat x, or repeat y, right? I've given I've given these, try using repeat x, repeat y, no repeat, right? Instead of like no repeat here, changing the value, you'll get different outputs, right? So yep, so that is majorly about this. Next up, sorry, that is majorly about changing the background image. Next up, we have bg image background dot css. So this is majorly going in through, and combining everything. So you just write background, so that therein green, yellow, URL, and no repeat, right? So it is a shorthand for writing the same background image. This is writing like in a long hand, writing everything particularly. Herein you don't really need to write everything particularly, you just write background, and add green, yellow as background, then URL if you need any URL to sorry, if you need any image to this, and then no repeat. So the output would be something like this. Reason, I have added no repeat, so this background is small in size, it is not repeating towards x, right? But if you see the background, green, yellow is the color, right? So that is the color that is spanning from here to the end, right? Yep. Next up, we have changing the text. So to change the text, I'm again going to look at CSS reason. The HTML for almost every one of them is same, right? So here we have something called as color, right? It changes the color of the text to red. Text align, you can center, left, right. Font family, you can have any font type, Times New Roman, Jokerman, Serif, Sans Serif, anyone that you like, Arial maybe, right? Then font weight, font weight, if you think about it, it's kind of a thickness of the text, right? Sorry, so it can be majorly thought of as the uh, thickness of each letter. That would be much better to say, but yeah, the amount of boldness, right? Next up, font size ki kitna bada, how much big or small would be the font. Then font variant, we are using normal here, right? So this is something that is not entirely in the course, but you can take a look at this as well, right? How it works, right? Then font style is italic, it is again italic, right? So going ahead, right? So if you are looking here at font variant, I have written here, right? Small caps, right? So it depends, right? The way you want it, right? Normal mean normal text, right? Then you can have small caps and a lot other variants of it, right? So going ahead, text decoration, right? Again, you know, here in, like, for example, I have write H1. We have indentation, right? Adding some space in front of the text, right? So you can say, see this space, this is indentation. Then text align left. You can have right, justify it, whatever you want. Text decoration overline. So I have drawn, it draws a line over the text, right? Then you can have line through or maybe underline, right? Underline the text. Then you have text transform uppercase. So all of this text is in uppercase. Word spacing, key, how much spacing is present in all the words, right? That is, say, going ahead here is it is 10 pixels, right? Letter spacing, so word spacing is different and letter spacing is different. Word spacing is space between the words like CSS and test. These are full blown words. But when you talk about letter spacing, so see, it is the space between, say, C, S, and then the S, then T and E, right? Though the space between this word CSS and test is the word spacing, and letter spacing is just the spacing between all these letters, right? So yeah, so that does it majorly. Then you have something called as absolute and relative uh, font sizes, right? So for example, the absolute ones are like saying in pixels, right? Pixels or points. So point, if you take a look at, is actually 1 by 72 of an inch. So to simplify everything, hand span, right, is actually a relative. Why? Because if you think in real terms, everyone hand would have different size, and because of that, if I say one hand span, right, it might be, say, 10 centimeter for me, for example, and it might be like 30 centimeter for you, right? So it is not a standard, right? So it is a relative, right? So herein again, we have some of the measures that are absolute, like pixel is absolute, right? Point is absolute, but some of them, like percentage, right? For example, I have defined the size for the h1 as, say, 10 pixel, and then I say 10% of h1, right, as a size, right? That is the percentage, right? What will happen, right? And that will actually would be 10% of h1. H1 size, if it changes, right, the size of this say paragraph that I'm saying 10% of h1, it would again change, right? So because of that, that is relative, right? So that is majorly it. So relative sometimes is useful, right, when we want to say, have the website running from, say, for different screen sizes, like phone pe bhi chalani hai, laptop pe bhi, so then in some way we can eventually have it relative, that it changes dynamically. We don't usually use that. There's something else we use it for, but yeah, this is something we can also use, right? Then margins and padding borders, right? So this is again a very important topic. Usually, this is asked, right? So margin padding looks similar, right? If you take a closer look at the image below, right? So margin is this white one, right? And padding is actually inside this blue box, right? So this is actually the padding, right? The pink one is the padding, right? So as you can imagine, the margins can be from top, right? The white one, this one is from top, left, one can be from right, and even bottom right. Similar for padding, right? But these two are different, right? As you can see in the image. So the margin is something like, looking, if you look at this blue box, the white one are the margins, right? The distance from the borders actually. If you can think of, from the, extreme screen bounds, right? But the padding is actually, inside this blue box, right? It starts over here, right? And this pink line is actually the padding. It's in the box, right? The spacing we have given, right? So cool. So going ahead again, the code, right? So padding left, top, right, bottom. Then you have margin top, top, right, left, bottom again, right? You can have padding and margins together, right, as well. No problems there. Okay. So padding would be, sorry, the margins would be calculated from the end bounds of the screen, but the padding would be calculated from, if you take a look at this box, right, that is appearing here, right, for from these, right, where the margin ends, from there, padding would most probably be calculated. Okay. So then we have something called as border. So border is nothing but, like, if you imagine a picture border, right? Frame you can say in some way, right? So maybe, I want a border over it, right? So this is a golden border, right? Then you can have different border styles. So herein we have groove, solid, dotted, double, inset. So you can try this code out. What do you need to do? Just copy this, right? Copy this up, this code up, right, and paste it, and in HTML file, name it .html, and then, copy the CSS file and paste it up, and but name it as border.css. That is one thing you are gonna do, because this is how it will link. This is how it will find key. HTML will say I need border.css. When you name it border.css, it is gonna find the CSS file, right? Other than that, if you don't really want to, copy, you can always click on the link and you're good to go. Now there are some disadvantages of CSS, but the ones written here are actually, again, taken in from a reference to the book, right? But none of these prevailed till the date, right? Because not same across different browsers, so it was, right, like a lot many years before, right? Now almost all the browsers, right, support HTML and CSS almost the same, right? So doesn't, not relevant, cannot be easily overridden. Sorry, can be easily overridden. So, CSS is not something which is, gone in and have security or some kind of encryption. So when we are getting a website, right, when we are actually loading a website, the HTML downloads into our laptop, and there, even there, CSS downloads into our device or desktop, whatever you may say, or laptop, right? So here in, you can actually right click inspect, right? For example, if I quickly go in, right click and inspect, so you'll actually see all the CSS, right? Yeah, sorry, you'll actually see all the this HTML. You can also see the CSS, right? This script tag is actually usually for JavaScript, right? So this code is actually a bit advanced piece of code here, right? Uh, like, it is not something you might have looked at as of now, but going ahead, if you find it thoroughly, you'll get some kind of CSS link, right? So there would be some kind of link relation herein, so that you need to take a look. Okay, so there is this style. So they have added inline, sorry, they have added this internal CSS here, right? Because this style is here. So not finding external CSS at this point, right? I might need to look a bit harder, but if you take a look, you'll be able to find it up, and you can edit and change it, right? So for example, if I double click here, right, I can actually change it, right? And if I click enter, uh, I remove the value, right? It would have a change, right, directly here. So let's take a look. Let me change something. right, in this HTML. So I choose a selector here, and if I say select this, so this is actually the code for this. So I can actually go in and change the content, right? As for example, if I write, going here, I write, say Shubham, right? So what you are gonna notice is yellow as seen in output as Shubham, right? Just a sec. I enter it up, right? So okay, it's not taking, but you can ideally update as well. Shubham, I might be doing some mistake here, but yeah. My point is like you can do it. So try to just look at the inspect window and change a few things. It would actually update if you reload. I don't want to, right? Uh, so going ahead, no, actually it won't reload, right? There is a reason because it would again get the code from the server, right? It won't update the code I have changed here, right? Cool. So going ahead can be easily overridden. So you can override in inspect window, but not something that you might want to do. Or maybe download the CSS and use it. You can download even the images that comes up in a website using the inspect. Then it does not always provide advantage of fast load. As I said, if you are using just one page, right, and you are using one CSS with it, doesn't load fast. Reason, now it has to download two files, right? So it's better there to use HTML attribute for one page. If you have more than 2 3 pages and all of them have CSS linked to it, then you're good to go. So that is all from my side. The most important bits being you know this static dynamic website, right? This usually comes in. Then remember a few benefits, 2 or 3 would do. Then looking at this different kind of CSS. Mixed CSS is very very important, right? Then the question that might come is key. They might ask you going ahead, this is the output. Write the CSS for this HTML code, or maybe they'll just tell you to write, the HTML code, right? Sorry, the CSS code, and the last one being margins and paddings. So the topics I would keep in mind is static dynamic, right? Priority number one, priority number 2, I'll be going with mixed. Priority 3, margin padding. Priority 4, writing the code. Actually, writing the code for CSS would be higher up the priority. I'll lower up the priority for the static and dynamic, right, to the fourth, and higher up the priority for the code, right? So code, first priority code, then second priority going ahead doing the mixed one, third priority margin padding, fourth priority static dynamic. So that is there, all there is to in terms of this CSS. So have a great day, all the best for the exam, and signing up, Shubha.